Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my special guest today is Marion Endicott from Injured Workers Consultants based down in Toronto. So Marion, you're here for a guest speaker at the Thunder Bay Injured Workers Support Group.
Yes.
A public meeting coming up tomorrow. Of course, when this views, it will already have happened. But one of the things now the Thunder Bay Group was interested in having you come up because they've been working on a platform for change, which is really building on work that you did some 10, 12 years ago. Tell me a little bit about that platform for change.
Okay, yes, I'd be glad to. And maybe even before I start to, I would just like to say how glad I am that the Thunder Bay and District Injured Workers Support Group is really grabbing the platform and using it to study the principles of workers' compensation and a vision of the kind of system we want, and to make use of it, to make it come alive. So what is this thing? So the Platform for Change is a document outlining fundamental principles of what we feel would be a well-functioning workers' compensation system, Ontario-based we're talking about, but it could apply anywhere, that really would serve injured workers and their families as the system was intended to do when it was originally set up. And the components of it are based on, a lot of study of original documents at the original conference that developed and adopted the Platform for Change, which was in May 2004. We studied the original founding documents of the workers' compensation system in Ontario and the various reports by commissioners through the years, what the reflections were, what the concerns were, put that together with our own experience and understandings to come up with this. And why did we want to do that? We wanted to do that because I had already mentioned, I think, that some things were going a little badly in the mid-90s. And they had been going badly, I guess, before that, but they reached kind of a crisis point at that point, and they've been going badly worse ever since. But at that point, we identified that the compensation system, the workers' compensation system, at least in Ontario and kind of all over Canada, was increasingly moving away from its actual reason for existence.
Which is 100 years now.
Yes.
And it's the oldest social program in Canada.
That's right.
It's the first one that came along.
That's right. It was 100 years ago, just about now, that the first legislation came out as a result of a major, basically, 3-year or more study by a fellow by the name of Sir William Meredith, who was Chief Justice in Ontario and actually the head of the Conservative Party of Ontario. And
so he wasn't a flaming radical.
No, he wasn't. But boy, oh boy, did he ever put together a good compensation system with excellent fundamental principles. And just if I could just quickly review a few of those principles, there are not that many, and then maybe talk a bit more about the reason for the Platform for Change. So what Justice Meredith observed was that before the compensation system existed, if somebody got injured at work, they would have to sue their employer in order to get any kind of monetary benefit. And mostly an injured worker would not be able to afford to sue an employer.
Right.
And not only that, but in those days, in order to win the case, there was all sorts of legal bars that had to be gotten over that made it almost impossible to win. But things were getting there was a lot of social unrest going on in the early 19th century. And the courts with juries began to increasingly find a way to side with the injured worker. And employers actually began to go bankrupt because of decisions against them. So
big settlements.
So these things kind of came together. The government said, we need to do something, and got Justice Meredith to study the matter. And so he decided on certain principles. He said, we need a public system, not a private kind of insurance plan system. It has to be public. It has to be based on an independent organization, independent from government. So it's not going to be an organization that is pressured by the forces that put pressure on government. That it's going to be there in order to do the right thing according to the intentions of the system. It should be based on, it should be funded by employers. Why? It should be funded by employers because employers are the ones in a position to pay, because they can pass the cost on to others, and they will.
And the cost of production.
The cost of production, it's a cost of doing business. They incorporate it into the cost of the price of their product. And whereas if the worker was paying into the system, they would have no place to pass that cost on. They would just have to absorb it, and the worker is already paying a cost when they get injured, which could be enumerated. So he said the employers will pay because they can pass it on. But the employers need to pay it on a collective liability system, and that basis, and that means they don't pay individually like insurance. They don't pay based on the cost of the claims that arise out of their business. They just put all the money in the pot together, just kind of like we do for OHIP and CPP and these kinds of programs.
Right. Public programs, everybody contributes, and
right.
the people that need it are the ones that are able to access it.
That's right. So you put the money in the pot, and then injured workers, regardless of who the employer is, they need the money. The system identifies that and pays. Put simply, that's that idea. And then another fundamental principle was that the system was to be non-adversarial. So we're getting away from this whole business of courts and battling, and instead you have a system where the compensation board has certain rules, has certain definitions, and says, yep, you're an injured worker, you got hurt, we're going to pay you, and we will pay you for as long as the disability lasts. So that was another principle.
Okay. We've got about a
getting out of
minute
time.
left, so
Ooh,
that we got to capture those.
Okay, so those were the principles. The system was moving away from that more and more. The system was concerned with not having employers pay very much into the system, and in order to achieve that was finding ways to reduce what was paid to injured workers, either by simply not allowing the claim in the first place, or once allowed to find excuses to get them off benefits. Pushing injured workers off the system and into poverty. They would put lots of words around it, like, oh, we've got you all ready to go to work, but really they weren't. And as a doctor that I recently heard at a conference that you were listening to on a podcast, he says, you know, the system has become a transfer to poverty system, and that poverty, he as a doctor identifies poverty as the greatest disease of our society. So we ended up with a system that was producing disease, not giving support to those who had incurred it.
And so the platform for change is really an attempt to say, hey, let's go back to a system that actually worked.
That's right.
That was public, that provided some level of support
Yes.
to those who needed it, and trying to actually work with the government to make the system
Yes.
better for everyone.
Yes. The platform for change is very positive. It states things in a very positive manner to produce the best result.
Okay, so we're just about out of time. So people, if they want to find out more, is that same website, the injureworkersonline.org?
Yes, yes. And the Thunder Bay group also has a website.
The ThunderBayInjureWorkers.com.
Okay, yeah.
So, Marion, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're out of time.
Yeah.
There's so much more to talk about.
Just got warmed up.
But really, if you're interested, please check those out online. You can also check out our information on Facebook. We're at Community Conversations. We also post the shows a couple of weeks following airing on YouTube. Also, there's a YouTube channel, Community Conversations. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back with you again next week.